It's hard to find a car or truck today that has this in between the front seats. For many of us, we first learned how to drive by pushing in the clutch and shifting the stick into gear. Manual transmissions, just like many things, have disappeared because of convenience, and they have been slowly replaced with automatic transmissions that do the job of changing gears for you. Unless you are driving an older model vehicle or a sports car, it's probably been a while since you've driven a 4, 5, or 6-speed stick shift. But there is no doubt you remember learning how to drive that very first car. Back when just about everyone smoked cigarettes, cars came equipped with cigarette lighters in the front and back seat. These lighters could be pushed in and they would heat up. Then after a few seconds, they would pop out to let you know they were ready to use. Today, these sockets have been repurposed into electrical outlets used for auxiliary DC power, which charges phones and other electronics in the car. If you had a car with push-in cigarette lighters, then there is no doubt that car had ashtrays installed in it. The front dash usually had a nice big ashtray that slid out like a drawer. If you weren't using the little vent window on the door to flick your cigarettes, then the ashtray was the next best thing. For those that didn't smoke, these ashtrays were used to hold change. The back seats also had access to ashtrays, but these were usually small flip-out ones that were either in the door or mounted on the back of the front seat. Remember rich Corinthian leather? This was a new name that Chrysler came up with to make you think that the interiors were nicer than they actually were. Ricardo Montalban was the pitchman, and his accent, along with the exotic word Corinthian, made people think they were getting the most luxurious and rich leather on the planet, when in reality, it was just the same leather found in other vehicles. The advertising campaign was a memorable one though, lasting from the mid-1970s through the 1980s. There was a time when 3-speed manual transmissions were controlled by a shifter attached to the steering column. This became known as 3 on the tree, and many student drivers learned to drive using this column shifter. The gear shifter mounted on the steering column was common from the 1940s through the 1970s, and the term 3 on the tree was countered by 4 on the floor, which meant that a 4-speed gear shifter could also be mounted to the floor of the car. Manual might be the best way to describe automobiles prior to the 1990s. Even the windows rolled up and down by cranking a handle in one direction or another. This was also true with door locks. They had to be pulled up or down to lock or unlock a car door. Push-button automation has become the norm now, but the days of having more reliable and less complicated systems for operating a vehicle are something that many of us miss about the older generations of cars. Have you ever turned your high beams on by stepping on a switch that was mounted on the floor? Before the switch was integrated into the steering column, high beams were operated with your left foot. These buttons could be found in cars into the 1980s, but they slowly began to disappear because the switches would get jammed up with dirt or accidentally turned on because your foot would wander. All of us have fond memories of riding in the back of station wagons. The rear-facing seat in the way back was always the best seat in the car. From here you could see all of the other cars behind you, and it made for some fun to wave and make faces at the other cars driving by. This seat could also be folded away to give you trunk space for all the groceries too. Car radios have evolved over the years, from AM/FM radios to 8-track and cassette tapes. But in the 1990s, you began to see aftermarket radios being sold that had a detachable face. This was a time when car radios and speaker systems were popular with thieves. And so the idea of removing the faceplate provided extra protection against your car getting broken into. But let's face it, most of us never removed the face because it was a hassle to carry around. Car keys are another thing that have changed drastically over the years. It used to be that when you bought a car, you received 2 keys. One was a round key that opened and locked the doors, while the other key was square and operated the ignition. General Motors was especially known for having 2 keys, and they even resisted switching over to just 1 key for the longest time. Today we have remote control key fobs that operate everything on a car, so the jingle of keys in your pocket is another thing you rarely hear anymore. The wheels of a car have undergone changes through the years too. Tires used to be fashionable with wide white walls that were ultra popular in the 1950s. These tires looked great, but were tough to keep clean. But nonetheless, they were still offered as an option on cars as the decades passed. Hubcaps were also something we used to see covering the lug nuts of a wheel. This protected them from dirt and grime, but also became a decorative accent on many cars. Lastly, there was a time when cars used to come with a full-size spare in the trunk. As cars have become smaller and space in the trunk limited, cars today are outfitted with a small donut tire that is only meant for temporary use. As I said earlier, radios have evolved. We have seen them go from just a radio to having the latest portable music technology. 8-track tape players were the first. Then they became compact cassette tapes. Then CD players were introduced, which offered superior sound. Now all of these are gone, and we are left with Bluetooth technology that connects to our phone and plays anything you could ever want. But there was something special about having those old features that remind us of our younger years. Filling up your car with gas is something that we all are familiar with, but knowing where the gas cap is used to be a little more tricky. The fuel tanks in older cars were in different locations. Therefore, the gas cap could be on the right or left side of the car, or even behind the rear license plate. You would have to flip down the license plate to find it, which made for a funny scene in National Lampoon's Vacation, as Clark tried to gas up the family truckster. The hood of cars used to be adorned with a fancy ornament that let you know what make of car it was. These mini metal sculptures looked like they were in motion, even when standing still. But eventually they became a safety issue for pedestrians. The fixed-mounted ornaments first became spring-loaded. Then car makers began to use logo emblems that laid flat on the hood. And now many of them are just incorporated into the front grille of the car. If you enjoyed this video, click on this playlist to watch even more. And as always, thank you so much for watching.